Hello, internet friends. What is up? How is it going? How are you? I have a lot of feelings today because I finished Jennette McCurdy's latest book. So, I know that I've been pivoting more towards writing content, but sometimes you send 50 text messages to your best friend recapping the entirety of a book to her, but it is still not enough, and so you need to talk to the internet. So I read Jennette McCurdy's latest book, Half His Age, and I am seeking community with the other people who have already read it because no one in my personal life wants to. Let's recap the synopsis and then we're gonna talk about my feelings, and it's probably gonna get pretty immediately spoiler heavy from there. Half His Age, as we probably all know, is about a 17-year-old girl who starts an affair with her married teacher. And as you might expect, the age difference between them is quite big. You could perhaps say half his age. And, because of the subject matter, when this book was first announced, there was a lot of early concern about how to handle the subject matter, if people are even interested in reading a book that was going to be about such an uncomfortable subject matter. I think that we perhaps forgot that Jennette McCurdy has deep personal ties to being involved in predatory relationships as a child. And I think the backlash and concern during the early announcements of this book should have remembered that. Right now, before we get into all of my feelings, I do think that I want to address people who are like, I love Jennette's memoir, I'm glad my mom died, but I don't really want to read about an old man having sex with a teenager. And I get that and I respect that. I want this section to be used to convince you to still try the book because there is a lot more that Jennette is trying to say. And I think we're doing her a disservice by not reading this book just because of the subject matter. I will say, first of all, one, if you are concerned that this book romanticizes grooming, it absolutely doesn't. This book specifically was inspired because she had this kind of unprocessed rage from a similar relationship that she experienced when she was barely 18 and with a guy who was 35. And this is a relationship that is discussed in the memoir. So I think when you frame it in terms of the story was inspired by anger she had towards a relationship similarly, I think it's very clear that she's not romanticizing this kind of relationship. Two, obviously if just straight up you don't want to read about a grown man having sex with a teenager, I mean, yes, get it, same. But if it helps, there's actually not that much graphic sex in the book. Well, yeah. I would say that, I've seen Jennette McCurdy read excerpts of it online, and she did read, the not safe for work excerpts. But I will say that I think that she did that specifically to kind of tell you, the reader, this is how graphic the book can get, and you kind of have to deal with that. But I will say it doesn't happen that often. Also, they are uncomfortable, but it is the point that they make you uncomfortable. But I do think that for the most part, she kind of yada yadas and says and they had sex, Hello, Editing J here with a retraction, or at the very least a clarification. Okay, so there's a lot of graphic sex in the book. And that's my bad for maybe misleading you. The book opens with cunnilingus. So I realized that what I meant was, even though there's a lot of graphic sex in the book, there are only 2 instances, maybe 3, where it made me uncomfortable. And the reason why it made me uncomfortable is not because it was graphic. The reason why was because you, the reader, are not into reading about a teacher having sex with a teenager. You, the reader, are not into it, but you are in the headspace of a main character who is very into it. And there's 2 times that I can think of where it's very vivid, the descriptions that are happening, and that contrast in what you, the reader, feel
and what the main character that you are sitting in feels. And that's where the discomfort comes from. The discomfort does not come from the graphic nature, at least for me. In other sex scenes in the book, even though they are graphic, you're already at the point where Waldo, the main character, is kind of over the relationship with Mr. Corgi. And so because you and Waldo are aligned emotionally, it doesn't make it uncomfortable to read those scenes. And also, during those scenes, Waldo isn't like under duress, if you catch my drift. It's like she's almost bored at that point. And so the graphic nature of the scene doesn't matter to me, if that makes sense. There's only 2 scenes where you kind of have to sit through the discomfort, but also the discomfort is the point.
Yeah. Backlash and criticism. Social media users have labeled the plot irresponsible. Others have criticized the writing style as crude and shock-driven, and I disagree with both those things. First of all, the plot is not irresponsible because Jennette McCurdy handles this subject manner incredibly responsibly, in my opinion, and I think that's from, you know, her personal experience of being in a relationship like this, that she had complicated and a lot of negative feelings about. Crude and shock-driven. Shock-driven, I think, is fair, but I don't think it's like a sensationalized. I don't think that Jennette is sensationalizing her writing. Her writing style is just very matter of fact. And when you're talking about, you know, a relationship that's illegal and inappropriate, of course that's going to be shocking. But her writing style is not crude. I remember when I saw a reel of her reading aloud, kind of one of the more graphic scenes of Half His Age. It was quite graphic, but I was also like, God damn, she's such a good writer. I was like, God damn, Jennette McCurdy's the voice of my generation. Finally, I think that this book is not about age difference relationships. This is a book about women's desire, and specifically the suppression of that desire, and how that suppression can explode out of you in ways you didn't expect. Jennette McCurdy herself describes this book as being about feminine rage, and I think what she is talking about is the feminine rage that comes from suppressing yourself, your wants, your needs, until that boils over. And also how, as a woman, you're taught to suppress yourself, suppress any emotions, to be what, well, specifically what men want, right, for a straight woman. But also what happens when you unleash your rage and demand what you want, what happens when you take charge in that way. I also think that this book has a lot to say about addiction and consumerism, oddly. Specifically, marketing towards women is tied to preying on women's insecurity of like, I am not enough. Maybe this lip balm will make me enough. Maybe this body cream will make me enough. Maybe this top from Shein will make me enough. I think that this book ties a lot of different threads together beautifully. So my pitch to you is, I'm begging you to read this book because no one in my personal life wants to. 2, I think that Jennette has a lot of valuable things to say. I think that Jennette has a very valuable perspective on how society treats women. And I think that this book adds a very valuable perspective to modern day discourse about women in general. That's my pitch. That being said, now I want to read to you the series of text messages I sent my best friend yesterday. Okay, so ready? Finally, Jennette McCurdy's book came in. I'm so stressed, Jamie. I'm gonna be so productive. Solo admin day. Jennette McCurdy's book. Sure. And Waldo's not gonna fuck her teacher. He rejected her, but now, Jamie, he drunk called her. Again. I know it was the second time he drunk called her. By the way, why did this teacher have her number? Why? Oh, you messy ass pedo piece of shit. But also, I love Waldo. She's so aggressive. I just wish she used her aggression anywhere else. Ooh, that's also something that maybe would have been controversial about the book. So, Waldo is very, like, sexually confident for a 17-year-old. She's the one who kind of latches on to Mr. Corgi, her teacher, and decides to pursue him very aggressively. Although, to be fair, since the book is entirely in her perspective, we actually don't know if he latched onto her in the same way. But the book portrays her as the aggressor, as the pursuer, the chaser, during, like, the early part of, you know, their courtship, I guess you could call it. Gross. She is the one who kisses him first. She is the one who pushes herself on him first. And there has been conversation about like, oh, it's kind of like a gray area because like she was the aggressor. And for me personally, it's not a gray area. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because her brain wasn't fully formed enough to understand why this was a bad and dangerous thing to do. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't give a shit. She was still a child. Who cares? Personally, what I liked about this aggressive teenage girl being the main character is that I liked that she was the active protagonist. And I also felt like I understood throughout every part of the book why she was so infatuated with this man, despite the fact that, you know, she was being treated poorly. And I also couldn't understand why this man would think that he is not the villain of his own story. Jennette McCurdy like talks about how like in early drafts the teacher was more of like a like one-dimensional mustache twirling villain because no one is the villain of their own story. So I need to understand this character well enough to understand why he wouldn't think that he is the villain. And I felt that she accomplished that beautifully. She was like, it's doing like Waldo a disservice to make him so one-dimensional. We need to understand why she like loves him. I don't have sympathy for him at all, but I have sympathy, deep sympathy for Waldo because I understand how she could have fallen for this person. I also think that another theme in this book is power and who has it, and I think it's very interesting to know that throughout the course of this illicit relationship, Waldo absolutely doesn't have the power. But because she was so aggressive and pursuing and chasing, you could see how she would think, at least in the early stages, that she had power in this relationship. I just think that Waldo's aggression adds complex layers to the story and her character, but I don't think that it like justifies the relationship in any way. And that's why I like those details. Okay, continuing on. He is at her apartment, drunk. And by her apartment, I mean her mom's apartment. Because Waldo is a minor. I'm so stressed. LOL. They're already fucking, so I don't feel like I have a reason to be stressed anymore. But in actuality, I feel like I have more reasons to stress. Like, when is this man's wife gonna find out? When will the police find out? Also, this man wants to be some kind of art mentor for this girl. I'm like, sir, this is not your girlfriend. This is a child you are having sex with. LOL, I'm already 50% through the book and I started it this morning. This book moves at a breakneck pace, Jamie. Like, the chapters are only 5-ish pages long. 5 iPhone pages. Oh yeah, I finished the entire book on my iPhone. Waldo's also suddenly realizing that her fantasy of her teacher is not living up to the reality of who he is. I just realized I don't know this teacher's first name, because Waldo only ever refers to him in her mind as Mr. Corgi. Wild. 68% in and we got a first name! But then, even though she now knows his first name, she still says, and I quote, and I took a screenshot, "I love you too, Mr. Corgi." She is mad. She does not like being the mistress anymore. Yes, bitch, let the rage bubble up inside you. Let it out, girl, you got this. Yes, girl, you break up with his sorry ass. No, he is the needy and obsessive one. That's right, loser. How does it feel to want what you can't have? I'm stressed again. Waldo, you were doing so good. You were ignoring all his texts and calls. It doesn't matter if he leaves his family or not. He still can't be with you fully because he's an adult. But side note, I love the LOL. Yes, girl, laugh at his audacity after he attempts to pour his heart out to you. Another screenshot. He says he's gonna do it, and then he says, I made a reservation for us at this hotel or whatever for 9:30 if you meet me there. And she says, I'm gonna be there at 9:30. But you're not there, I'm leaving at 9:31. And I'm like, no, don't go at all. No, Waldo, we were doing so good. You were so strong. I feel that the other shoe is about to drop. We are in the final hour, Jamie. Damn, it's crazy that I started this book this morning. Angel, I told you this wasn't gonna happen the way you wanted it to. He did exactly what he said he would, but then when he met up with her later, he just cried violently about breaking up with his wife and fell asleep. Which is actually reminiscent of Jennette's real-life story that inspired the book. God, I love her. She has so much to say about women's desire, the suppression of that desire, and oddly enough, consumerism. By the way, I feel like I'm gonna turn these texts into a YouTube short. Honestly, I think that's a good place to end the text messages. There are a couple more, but I think this is a good place to end it because I think that that last text does surmise, like, my entire opinion about this book, that I think that Jenna has a lot to say, and I think that you should listen to her. So it's very clear I had a lot of feelings about this book. I had a lot of emotion about this book, and I am seeking community in the internet. What did you think about this book? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Discourse is welcome, but in the meantime, thank you for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I hope to see you in another video. Okay.